And welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Darren Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And today we'll be covering, probably, I would say, spoilers, probably the best Die Hard on a clone, action movie clone, you know what I mean? Covering Speed, directed by Jan de Bont, and his directorial debut, starring little-known actor Keanu Reeves. I think he's gone somewhere, right? Like since '94, like he's become a little bit of a something.
Yeah, he's had a pretty good career, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so good. I think Speed was a good jump. Sandra Bullock also. I think like this gave her the boost that she needed to win an Oscar, like later on in life, right?
I would say too, this movie made her. So
yeah, okay, and all that. So yeah, popular stuff. Dennis Hopper's in there too, Jeff Daniels, a lot of good people. So yeah, we'll be talking about Speed with my friend Jackson Bourne from Twitter. But before we get into that, just to recap briefly our last episode. Obviously, we had our friend Jason on to chat about Braveheart, which was his one-time favorite movie. I thought it was a fascinating conversation, just the way that we had three different reactions to the movie, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, each one of us had a different take on it. I mean, I ended up enjoying it more this time, and you were kind of the same as you were back then, and Jason liked it less. So that was kind of fun to have all three, ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and obviously it's, when we talk about Mel Gibson being the star and everything, with all the cancellations and people turn out to be scuzz buckets, the people that we once worshipped. I think it's important to chat about those things and talk about our feelings about them, and and then concentrate on the work. I mean, if we can do that, right? And so, chatting about Mel Gibson and his legacy and then his career as a filmmaker, I think it's two different subjects. I think, hopefully we didn't offend too many people talking about it that way, but yeah, a very enlightening and fun conversation on a movie that was very prominent for us back in the 90s. So absolutely go and check out that episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and we'll move on to our next big one. Again, got my friend Jackson on to talk about Speed, and we'll be happy to chat about that. But before we do, let's go ahead and watch the trailer.
All right, pop quiz. Airport. Gunman with one hostage. He's using her for cover. He's almost to a plane. You're 100 feet away. What do you think?
Shoot the hostage.
What?
Go for the good wound and he can't get to the plane with her. Clear shot.
You're deeply nuts, you know that?
All right, gentlemen, what we have here are 13 passengers in an express elevator. Bomb's already taken out cables. Bomber wants $3 million or he blows the emergency brakes.
Anything else that'll keep this elevator from falling?
The basement.
He can strike anywhere, at any time.
Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Why are they messing with me? Do they think I'm doing this for fun?
For LA cop Jack Traven.
Tell me again, Harry, why did I take this job?
Come on, 30 more years of this, you get a tiny pension and a cheap gold watch.
Cool.
The game began.
Very exciting, Jack. Some close calls, huh?
When someone put the city of Los Angeles to the ultimate test.
Pop quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do? What do you do?
Now.
Are you insured? Yeah, why?
He's the only solution.
We just got a ransom demand from your terrorist. Says he's rigged the city bus. Where's Jack?
Where do you think?
Stay on or get off.
Get off.
This is much better.
Everybody hold on!
Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock.
Pop quiz. You have a hair trigger aimed at your head. What do you do? What do you do?
Speed. Get ready for rush hour.
Okay, Speed, 1994, directed by Jan de Bont, starring Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock, Jeff Daniels. Johnny, want to welcome our next special guest. He is a film and pop culture enthusiast. He's a self-proclaimed nostalgist, so that'll work well with our
very
podcast.
good.
He's making quite a name for himself on Twitter. It's fun watching him kind of build his fan base there. Want to welcome Jackson Boren to NostalgiaCast.
Right.
How you doing, Jackson?
Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. I'm a fan of the podcast. It's nice to finally get to see you guys and talk to you.
Yeah, so this is, I think we were talking before, this is like a face reveal for you, right? Unless like between us recording and then you actually doing another podcast on video, like this would be your first on video, like actual reveal. So
Absolutely.
you're like Red Dawn that got the PG-13 rating, even though Flamingo Kid was the first to be released in theaters with PG-13. I think I'm getting that right. So that's kind of going to be your legacy from here on
Exactly.
out.
We need to be your first, is what Darren's saying. So
Yeah, there you go. So we just want to make sure we get that in the books. So again, we've got to build quite a rapport on Twitter. Like I said, you're fun to follow. You're really huge in the 90s movies, and so you're perfect for this season. You're one of the first people that we reached out to, especially since we've been getting along so well. It seems like I've met so many like what's the word I'm looking for, like soulmates or kindred spirits online, especially on Twitter, and just especially conversations about movies and things like that. So it's been fascinating to kind of gather this group of people that are like-minded. And again, you're one of the really smart tweets. Like you just tweeted one about Van Damme, because I think when he was trying to start out, he like wrote letters to everybody. Is that what the story was?
Yeah, he was struggling in Belgium and was not really finding any connections in Hollywood. So he was sending letters out, and the one response he got back was Kirk Douglas. And then, Kirk Douglas gave him encouragement, a little bit of advice, wasn't sure where it was going to go from there. And then years later, Van Damme is on Arsenio Hall promoting Double Impact, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirk Douglas calls in and says, "Hey, remember me? I'm still rooting for you." And, stuff like that just, that's what I love.
Yeah, and that was really cool. That got you like something like over 500 likes or something like that. So, you do you just tweeted something about like you were in a store and you heard Enya's Book of Days. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it's stuff for me that's like the things that remind, like that you or I or people who are from that, we're at the right age in that time that'll see that and they'll be like, it like unlocks a memory, or it's just like an aha. That's sort of the content that is my bread and butter. And it's really, for me, what I found the most rewarding about it, at least with Twitter, is just connecting with others like yourself who, just have a passion and a love for specific kind of movie, and a movie that was a lot more common back in the 90s and the 80s.
Right. That was Book of Days. Didn't they play that exclusively with Far and Away? Is that right? Is that the movie that they played?
Yeah, it was Far and Away, but it ended up in the reason why I was tweeting about that was because I remember seeing it in a bunch of other movies too. It was there's a few songs like that where it was just like in every trailer.
They seem to just have this catalog of like 10 songs that they use for every trailer. So that's interesting. So my question for you, just to start off with, is, I've listened to you, let's see, what you've been on a bunch of podcasts. You've been on Film Feast, Film Shake, which you covered Speed just recently. I'm jealous that they were able to nab you first for that, by the way.
But just so we're clear, I tried to really, dig some gems out for this one, so we would have, some really unique moments here. So
good. Yeah. So your conversation with Jordan and Nick was very like all inclusive, and so I was like, oh man, like he's covering like all the bases. I thought that was great. But that Force 5, the podcast, Soundtracker podcast, Uncut Gems, Video Confidential, and again, it sounds like you're very educated. You take control of the mic, and in a lot of ways, I hope I'm not insulting the hosts of those podcasts. In a lot of ways, you kind of school them on like the education and the trivia and all that for these movies. And so I'm just curious, like, why don't you have your own podcast? You're so good as a guest. You could probably run your own 90s podcast.
It's funny because I talked to Matt Bledsoe from Film Feast about that, and I want to give like my absolute best to these, appearances when I come on a podcast, and I take research very seriously, and I take, knowing, pulling back into my memories and really making sure that what I remember about these films is accurate. And I just sometimes I think that, if I was giving so much on a regular basis, and also there's just so many great concepts already existing that I've prefer to just be a guest and be able to like, be a highlight, on my different friends' shows and be able to, bounce around. Plus, that's the other thing that keeps it interesting for me is like different podcasts have different premises and angles at which to talk about these movies. And so that's what keeps it interesting for me also is like, I might be on your show talking about it through the lens of what you and Johnny, how you observe films, and then be on, like I just did a show a month ago called The Song Will Go On. And it's about songs inspired by films. So usually a song from the soundtrack. And we spent a whole episode talking about Come With Me by Puff Daddy and Johnny Page
from Godzilla
and Jimmy Page from Godzilla. And that was its own sort of like conversation that I probably couldn't have had if I was just on a show talking about Godzilla, because we really went deep on that. So that's the type of thing that interests me and kind of keeps me from, going further into doing my own podcast or something.
Yeah. Again, that's a very that's an interesting take. It took us a while to come up with our own kind of hook, especially since they've got 90 million podcasts out there. So excellent take.
Well, Jackson, this season, Darren and I, we decided to do 90s movies. And I know you know that, but Darren and I fell in love with the 90s movies during that time. We went and saw everything over a few summers. What was it? How did you gain your affinity for 90s films? And is it only 90s movies, or do you have like a broader sense of like other decades as well? Or is it something about the 90s that kind of appeals to you more than others? Or maybe talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So like Darren said, for anyone who knows me or interacts with me on Twitter, it's pretty clear that the 90s is my favorite decade of film. There's something that I really appreciate about the way pop culture and entertainment was consumed at that time in such a monolithic way. It's the thing that makes me fascinated with like movie marketing during that decade and promotional tie-ins and things like that we, everything was shaped by the way we consumed film and television at that time. And all that changed with the internet. So sure, I'm a fan of plenty of films from the 70s and the 80s and the aughts. But I think the formative nature of my experience with movies from the 90s just gives them a special place for me when we're rewatching or discussing them like this. And at the risk of sounding like an old man yelling, get off my lawn, I think one of the things to note is so many great movies from the 80s and the 90s, just you look at them and you're like, that could never get made today.
Yeah.
And I think that just makes them treasures to me in a whole different way when we sit and ruminate or return to them like this. Darren tweeted I think it was yesterday or today about Ticket to Paradise, the Julia Roberts, George Clooney movie, and how it feels nostalgic of the 90s, not because it's connected to any IP, but because it's simply two charismatic leads just playing off of each other, and how that's, why is that a lost art at this point?
Yeah, we used to go to movies for that, and now it's so what did it like its opening weekend it grossed like 16 million, I think, with the last couple days as of when we're recording this. But it's like, wow, what a great throwback to the time of like, Hepburn and Tracy, or Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, Arsenic and Old Lace, or Bringing Up Baby, that kind of thing, where it didn't matter what the plot was or what the story was about. It was just, I'm going to go see the new Katharine Hepburn movie, or the new Audrey Hepburn movie, or the new, or anything like. You would just go and you would just bask in the glow of these actors, and it's just kind of a lost art. So to be able to see, what did you call them, Jax? You said it's great to see mom and dad bringing back movies, right? It's great to see them like come and like command the screen. I think Sandra Bullock was another one just recently, and that had a number one. What was that movie that she was in with
The Lost City?
The Lost City, right? And so it's great to see stars command the box office as opposed to superheroes or IP. Or as good as Top Gun Maverick is, it's good to see like all these movies like original content. I don't know if I'd call Ticket to Paradise original, but again, that's not what we're going to these movies for. We're just going to see these stars. Were there any particular movies, you just mentioned that particular movies in the 90s or 80s that wouldn't be made today? Was there like a particular like couple that you could think of just off the top of your head that would be good examples of that?
I mean, when I think about the things that we reminisce on from the 80s and the 90s, I mean, favorite movies of mine, I mean, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one that always comes up in conversation with me and others, and how, there's this movie that it's built on all this different converging IP, and how like where we live today in pop culture and entertainment, all of that would just get tangled up, and there's no way you could legally make that movie again today. But then there's also these smaller films like Mixed Nuts. It was a Steve Martin movie from the early 90s where I think Nora Ephron was involved with it as well. And it's just this small, it's just a small film with all these just interesting, quirky actors, some of them character actors, some of them went on to be bigger. And I can't imagine something like that, registering or being more than a blip on the radar nowadays.
Yeah.
Without some kind of massive hook.
Yeah, like a straight to streaming kind of thing that kind of disappears, right?
Yeah.
So such a weird, like, again, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I could see Johnny nodding too. It's like during the 90s, that's when Johnny and I, we had appreciation for movies before that, but I think 90s, correct me if I'm wrong, Johnny, but the 90s were the movies where that's where our love, even though like they're better, the movies in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, those are the ones that set the standard, and the ones that movies are just copying today. It's just recycling like old themes. But 90s movies were very formative for us, wouldn't you say, Johnny?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Because there wasn't a time when we actually tried to do it ourselves as well. We were out there trying to make our own films. And so, it was a learning, process for us as well.
Yeah, with the Tarantinos and the Finchers and all that, like just seeing how the different ways they'd shoot film. So yeah, so I totally, Jackson, understand what you're saying with like the 90s. That's the one that we kind of cut our teeth, and that's where so we do have an affinity or a nostalgia, I guess you could say, for those movies that came out during that time. Well, you'd agree with that, right? I mean, that's basically where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
Okay. So with Speed, this season, since we're tackling all these movies, it's been fascinating talking about Tarantino. It's been fascinating talking about, Fight Club or Fincher, or all these and you see all these trends with Die Hard, right? Die Hard in '88 became this like pinnacle of action movie making, to the point, like, Johnny and I talked about Pulp Fiction for our season opener. That a movie has made an impact if other movies try to copy what that movie did, like the aesthetic or the sound, or casting the same actors and stuff like that. And Die Hard was definitely one of those, because I think in the 90s, what Passenger 57 or Air Force One was one, Speed was one, obviously, Executive Decision, Sudden Death, which you covered before and talked about.
Yeah, Under Siege.
Right. The Rock would count as one of those, right?
Yeah.
And then now, like, I think most recently, like Skyscraper, which is just Die Hard, except the Rock has a bum leg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. Or White House Down, which I thought was, for Emmerich movie, I thought was a lot of fun. It was very knowing, kind of poked fun at itself. But again, it's Channing Tatum and a wife beater. And he's crawling through attic and crawl spaces. I'm like, this is obvious. Like, this is more Die Hard than any of these Die Hard clones has been. But when you mentioned Speed as part, like the one you wanted to cover, I thought that would be great, because that's, like we talked about, it's a great trend. So what is your history with Speed? Like, how did the movie come to being for you? How did you grow to love it? What's your history with it?
Okay, so I was 11 when Speed came out, and I didn't get to see it in the theaters. So I had to wait, let's see here, another year until it premiered on HBO. I probably watched it a dozen times over the summer after that. There was something that was really cool about it at the time that I didn't necessarily see in other action movies of that era. I didn't feel like it was trying to, and maybe I didn't realize this until later, I didn't feel like it was trying to wink at me. From the jump, it's this high concept, and it embraces the ridiculousness of its high concept and takes it seriously, which I think I loved about it, because it never ventures into becoming a parody of itself, even when it throws the most unrealistic scenarios at you.
Right.
And then I finally saw Speed again in theaters, or I saw it for the first time in theaters at the New Beverly Cinema this past April. And when I say that seeing it on the big screen just brought the movie to life in a whole new way, I mean, the audience laughing at all the jokes, and imagine just watching a movie for a lifetime at home by yourself or with a couple friends, and then finally seeing it in a packed theater. It just all clicked, and it was like, yes, just validating all of my opinions about the movie and how well made it was. Yeah, and then at the time, going back to when I was a kid, this was the action movie that I think I clicked with, and that when I was, role playing with friends and having fun, talking about our favorite action movies, this was the one that I always brought up. I loved Keanu in this movie as a kid so much that I went out and I bought the Casio G-Shock that he's wearing in the movie because I thought it just looked so awesome. And then later on I realized that apparently it had been discontinued prior to the movie, and then it became so popular that they brought it back. So I wasn't alone apparently. But yeah, that was sort of my experience with Speed as a kid.
Okay. And then Johnny, your experience is probably the same as my experience, since I believe we saw this movie together. But what was your history with Speed?
Well, mine's the exact opposite of yours. I mean, I saw it in the theater for the first time with Darren when we were like, maybe, what were we, juniors or seniors in
Something like
high school?
that. Yeah. So we're 17.
Yeah, something like that. And then it was the exact opposite. I watched it on VHS or DVD, for the remainder of, the time, the past few years. And so, anyway, I had that exciting adrenaline rush in the theater, and then it kind of fizzled out for me. I kind of stopped, caring about it. I still liked it. I still enjoy it. I think it's a solid movie. And like you, I think Keanu Reeves does a great job in this movie. It's one of my favorite, parts that he's played. But I can't really say anything too negative about this movie. I like it. It's a ride. It takes you on a journey. I do like movies, these action movies that you can insert yourself into, and you can imagine how you react in the situation, what you would do, what you would say, and those kind of movies that provide that kind of adrenaline rush while you're watching it. Those are the best, and so that's why I respect this movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think what we did, Jackson, is we had to, like I said, we were 17. And so we would climb into my Honda Prelude and we would have to drive, because I think like the theaters here, like they would card you, right?
Yeah,
so we were
wouldn't check you.
So we would drive up, I think it was like 40 minutes away. It was the Southtown Mall, the theater there, which is no longer there. I think it's like a sports shop. But, we would drive up there because they would let us in and we could see almost everything. That's where I believe we saw Pulp Fiction even though Pulp Fiction didn't play in our county because it was too R-rated, I guess. But Speed was one of the ones that we drove up, and I think my Honda Prelude is so old that it overheated, so we had to stop on the side of the road and let it cool down. So we had to leave a good an hour and a half early just in case something like that would happen. But there's just something about that experience of driving a certain distance to see a specific movie that it hit. I'm not sure. I don't think that we saw it, Johnny, because it was getting good reviews. I think we just saw everything. And so that was just the newest movie. So we drove up and saw it. And like you guys said, there's a rush, and we'll talk about how it builds and everything like that. But there was an adrenaline rush to that movie where we walked out and we were like an exhale because of all, and so that's an experience to cherish. And I think, I'll just go ahead and say it. I think out of all the Die Hard on A clones, Speed is the number one. I think it's the one that did it. Was its own thing. It wasn't just a copy. I know White House Down is fun because it's a copy of Die Hard, but Speed took that same formula and it basically made it its own, which is the difference. Like a lot of things you see with Pulp Fiction, you had 2 Days in the Valley, you had 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag that were trying to copy the Pulp Fiction sound and the Pulp Fiction feel, but they just didn't get it because, not all of us can be Quentin Tarantino, right? So they would only mimic the language, or they would only mimic the violence, and it didn't quite work. And Speed is one of those that just, like Soderbergh's Out of Sight, I say would be the most successful post non-Tarantino film, if that makes sense. So like that, Jan de Bont's Speed is that equivalent. It was the movie that took the lessons that made Die Hard good and either made it better or made it different enough that it could stand on its own. So the topics that we had, Jackson, you wanted to talk about what was your topic? You wanted how they took the Die Hard formula and they improved on it, right? Or how did you want to?
Right. Yeah. My topic was that Speed is not just a riff on the Die Hard formula, but it's an upgrade to it.
Okay.
So do you want me to jump into that now?
Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll discuss that. That's a great starter topic.
Yeah. So I'm going to make 2 statements and then I'm going to let you guys skewer them, or you can just, laugh, whichever seems more appropriate.
Yeah.
So Speed is the definitive action movie of the 90s. And Speed is not only the best of the Die Hard influenced films, I actually prefer it to Die Hard. So out of all of the Die Hard clones, as we've mentioned, Speed is considered, probably the best by many. So I don't think you'd be alone on that. It was critically and commercially successful. It's 283 million worldwide. And we'd seen this done before, as we were talking about. Cliffhanger and Under Siege came before it, Toy Soldiers, but I don't think any had really done it to this level of energy and momentum. It's been dismissed over the years by a lot of people as a Die Hard knockoff, and I don't consider it a Die Hard knockoff. However, I don't think that it would exist without Die Hard. So, it obviously owes some of its DNA to John McTiernan's work and everything that they did with the original Die Hard, which, Jan de Bont shot himself. But it improves on the formula. So we can go into the formula a little bit. It's usually a protagonist having to work by himself to overcome a bomber or a group of terrorists as the villains. Every Die Hard and all the films it's influenced have had some version of this structure. But one of the things that I think in the different versions that we discussed is that they've taken this, not particularly unique premise, and they've added something different, compelling to it. So, with Sudden Death, it was mainly just a different setting. It was putting it in a hockey game. And with Cliffhanger, it's Die Hard on a mountain. I don't want to get into criticizing Die Hard, because that's not what this conversation's about. I'm totally fine with the belief that a lot of people have that it's sort of the pinnacle definitive action movie. That being said, I want to make the case for why Speed innovated the formula even before Die Hard with a Vengeance did the next year. So Graham Yost cites the 1985 film Runaway Train as sort of the inspiration behind Speed when he was writing it. And that was based on a 1963 concept script by Akira Kurosawa, where you had this group of escaped prisoners on this train without brakes. And Yost looked at that and watched it, and he said, I think I could make this better by adding a bomb to it and then putting it on an inner city bus to raise the stakes and make it more exciting. So that's how he ended up writing Speed. And one of the coolest stories that I remember reading over the years is that when Graham Yost was actually done with it and he had submitted it to his agent, was waiting to hear back if it had gotten purchased, he's actually sitting in the writer's room at Full House, and he was a writer on Full House during this time, which he absolutely hated, and he ended up quitting Full House, and he's like on a trip over the weekend, and he's just in the dumps because he's just quit this job he hated, and he finds out that I believe it's Paramount has purchased Speed, and it's just like so that was sort of the beginning of Speed as far as its like inception. One of the things that I feel like set Speed apart from some of these other films that were also influenced by Die Hard, and actually from Die Hard itself, is the chemistry between Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock that I just feel like holds so much together and is just one of those aspects of the film that just keeps it going as this relationship between the two of them progresses. I mean, we look at Sandra Bullock in this movie and talk about the birth of a fully formed movie star. She has to give levity to this situation while not taking us out of it. And she just nails the balance of it throughout. And she brings this whole movie alive through her energy and then delivering some of these lines that are supposed to bring laughs to these scenes, even when they're so serious and tense. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what more you could want from her. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, Sandra Bullock, she's become, a mainstay. And I think the charm and the charisma that she has in this movie, we recognize it in the movies she has today. She's just been able to hone it. I think when you're talking about the obviously the chemistry between them, they fell in love on the set, even though it was unrequited, and it didn't come out later until now they're in committed relationships. So it's like, damn it, they could have been something, but you can feel that chemistry from them, that they did like each other, and that's always good when you can run into that. I just think that that chemistry is great. Obviously, I want to talk about the humanness of Speed that makes it unique. But with her funny lines, it's not just one line. It's like her saying, like, "Why aren't you in school?" It's like her reacting to stuff. It's not just her trying to be funny. It's like it's awkward. It's uncomfortable. Like you're gonna yell that at these kids that, like, I'm trying to keep this bus over 50 on city streets. Why are there kids walking in the middle? It's that kind of thing. Johnny, what do you think?
I love her in this movie. I think she's great in this movie. And my wife and I were talking after we watched it tonight that this is arguably what launched her career. Like, I think, like you mentioned, Jackson, she's a full form movie star, and this just kind of catapulted her into, stardom. But she had a realism that she brought to the character, to the role, and I believed her from the very beginning. When she was running to try to catch that bus, I was like, she's got it. She's got something. And I, like with the chemistry you're talking about, I couldn't take my eyes off her throughout the entire movie. So I thought she was great.
Yeah, I mean, she had already done something with Demolition Man.
Demolition Man, right.
I feel like I remember her really well from that. But this was where, she was above the title for the first time. And I think that Speed was proof that she could carry a film. And then there we go. The next year in 95, she has While You Were Sleeping, which I still consider one of my favorite rom-coms of all time. I think she deserved all the success that came to her because of this role that, like Johnny said, launched her career. It's kind of weird to look back and see some of the sliding doors things because, Devon and Yost both talked about how Halle Berry was like the first choice for this role, and how there was a sliding doors moment and she turned it down and they went with Bullock. And I can't even imagine anyone else in this role at this point.
Yeah, there was also, I think, Ellen DeGeneres was running for, which would have been a totally different dynamic.
Graham Yost almost talks about that in an embarrassed tone at this point because it's just so different from what the Speed we know would have been with her in that role. But yeah,
and I don't mean to diminish Bullock by saying this, but she's adorable. Like when she's like, "I'm not available to drive on Saturday, like busy," and she gives him that smile. It's like she's adorable. It's like, oh, she's attractive on top of being talented. So that's like, that's unfair. There's a bunch of those things. But like, especially with Keanu, like you're talking about the 1-2 punch of Demolition Man and Speed. I know that, and we just talked about this when we talked about Ghost. We talked about Patrick Swayze and Point Break. And I know Point Break was Keanu's first venture into action, after Bill and Ted. And it kind of tied in with that surfer dude aesthetic that he had because he's trying to surf, obviously. So it's kind of a joke. And even though I do think that he acquitted himself well in Point Break, I don't think that he came into his own as an action star until this movie. Johnny and I we've had extensive conversations about Keanu Reeves, and we did Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. We devoted a whole section to, look, Keanu Reeves might not be the best actor, might not be the most versatile actor, but he's pushing himself to do different things. He just doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be typecast as one particular thing, even though he does kind of falter or doesn't stand up as strongly in movies like Little Buddha, which he was in, or Much Ado About Nothing, or Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's like the fact that he's trying and the fact that he's pushing himself to do these things, that's impressive. But there's just an earnestness to him. As Jack Traven, I don't know what it is. What do you guys think it is that? And first of all, do you agree with is this the movie that cemented him as an action star? And why, when he stars in The Matrix and then later in John Wick, you're like, yeah, he doesn't need to prove himself. I already know. I think Speed is the movie that did that for him. Jackson, what do you think do you agree with that with Keanu? And what do you think is his dynamic?
I love that you use the word earnestness because that was the thing that stood out for me in Speed is, Keanu absolutely came into his own in this movie because, Point Break, he's really sharing the bill with Swayze. Yeah. And I think Swayze's name did a lot of the heavy lifting when that first came out. Cause he's right there in that Ghost time frame. And yeah. I think Point Break might've been Swayze's sort of apex, if we're being honest. So then looking to this, to Speed, Keanu broke the mold to the action heroes that we had seen leading up to that point. What I think imprinted on me about his performance in Speed was, I've said this before, the restraint and control that he maintains through this whole high pressure situation. His approach was so different from the other big names in the action genre prior. He actually has stated many times that he actually never aspired to do what guys like Arnold, Sly, and Bruce were doing he saw Jack Traven as a role, as a character, not a franchise or a product to sell. He was approaching this with the same seriousness and the reverence that he would to Shakespeare roles or to like a historical film, anything like that, where he did the research and he was very respectful of it. I mean, even with the stunts, Reeves said, he was really apprehensive about doing the stunts at first, because this was the first one where it really called for more than just, the hand-to-hand stuff. And so when they started shooting, he was unsure of himself. And by the time they'd gotten into production quite a bit, he was so committed that he pulled off the jump from the Jaguar onto the bus by rehearsing that in secret. And then he just did it against against DeBont's wishes. He wanted to just do it, and he made it happen. Keanu wanted to be methodical and calculated in how he portrayed Jack with this, in my opinion, unshakable earnestness. And I think he really accomplished it. I mean, I think that Keanu wanted, like, for one thing, I will say, he wanted the character to be rewritten after he signed on. He talked to Graham Yost and said, this is not a character I want just spouting off one-liners, every which way. That's not the character that this is. So he said, he wanted to play this hero who cares less about killing the bad guys and more about saving lives. And that really comes across in the final film. He was just this character that came through as, not the fastest or the biggest guy in the room, but the guy who was clever enough to figure out the villain's trick. He figures out how to beat Howard Payne, Dennis Hopper's character, not by strength or by, doing something other than just outwitting him.
Yeah, it's a chess game that they're playing, right? I mean, if you're going to go with that John McClane, Hans Gruber dynamic, it's a battle of wits, not just strength and not just it's I don't think Howard Payne keeps saying, like, don't attempt to grow a brain, or he calls him like an idiot, or he treats Jack as lesser. But watching the movie, it's like he's very instinctive, but he's using his brain to kind of stay one step ahead. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's like not as, he's youthful, he's not as experienced, let's say, and that's a point of his character. But he is trying, and he is smart and trying to outwit this guy that's trying to outwit him. So that's very smart. And again, Johnny, I want to ask your opinion on Keanu here. But when we talk about him in Much Ado About Nothing, like if I had by lips, I would like, he's not the best at spouting the dialogue, but you can see it in his eyes that he's trying. Like, it's not just that he's bad at it, he's really trying. It's just that he can't quite get there because I don't know if he's there yet. But Johnny, I know that we had extensive conversations about Keanu Reeves in this movie after we saw it. What is your opinion on him as far as like becoming an action star?
Yeah, okay. I like him in this movie. Like I mentioned before, I think he does a really great job as the action hero. And you can see it. You can see that he put all that effort into it. You can see that he's really, really pushing himself to give his all to this character. And it comes across. And so I really, really appreciate that. But like you mentioned, Darren, there are these moments, like when he's getting a little more intimate with Sandra Bullock, or when he's, maybe at the bar. There's these moments where he says his lines in a way you kind of go, what was that? And then he goes back into being Jack action hero, and you go, okay, now I'm back on board again. You know what I mean? So I really think, like you mentioned, he did everything he could to give it his all and do his best. And that does come across, but he does fall short a little bit here and there.
Right. And it's, again, and I don't know if I'd liken that to his inexperience of it. I just think that there's some things that some actors can't do. Like, if we're looking at him in The Matrix, I think he's great, like, because he's got the whoa even in the first one, and then he becomes a hero. What I love about The Matrix Reloaded, even though a lot of people pick on that, he's got a grace and a stoicism to him. It's magic watching him during the action scenes, because he's got full control of his body and the moves that he's making, and like it's just great watching him. And then in Matrix Revolutions, and I'm not sure if it's just because I got tired of the movies by then, but when he's all of a sudden required to emote, and Trinity spoiler dies, like, and he's crying, it's like, oh buddy. Like, you're not quite as good as when you're being stoic and when you're being the action hero. But so I definitely agree with all that. So Jackson, with your talking about how this betters the Die Hard for me, obviously I want to talk about, I don't want to criticize Die Hard. That's not what this episode is about, but I do want to talk about Die Hard a little bit as it compares to this movie. But what else did you want to say about why this is a better formula than Die Hard. How else did this better that form? Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, can I add one more thing to the Keanu conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk
There
Keanu
was
all
a-
day.
there
We
was-
love him.
Yeah, there was just one other thing that it was from a piece from Bright Wall Dark Room written by Jonathan Foster, where this was a couple years back, and he wrote this quote about Reeves' performances here, and he says it's not personal for Jack. He's not rescuing his wife or his daughter. He's not plagued with guilt over the senseless death of a friend. He's not haunted by his past, battling inner demons, or in need of redemption. And yet Jack finds himself leaping from the driver's seat of a commandeered Jaguar onto a LA city bus as it careens down the freeway. He may not be a complicated man, but Jack believes in the inherent goodness and dignity of those he's trying to save. And that quote just kind of summarized what I felt about this character coming away from the movie. So before we get into the rest of what I was going to say, that I wanted to add. So another thing that I feel like really stands out about this movie over some of the other Die Hard influence films is its concept. So I said before, it's a high concept premise. We know this is something where it's this ridiculous thing that you can just like spout off in a sentence or two, and it just summarizes what's unique about this movie. Here, the high concept premise is captured in a single catchphrase, and then you guys are going to know it as soon as I start saying it. Pop quiz, hot shot. There's a bomb on a bus.
Yep.
Once the bus goes over 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do? What do you do? It's the most important scene in the film. And it's this first phone call between Jack and the bomber after the first bus explodes. This one line creates the foundation for Jack's character arc, and it sells the premise for the film, in my opinion. So you got Jack, Jack first is responding to Harry's quiz in the elevator shaft with this outside the box solution. He's like, I'm going to shoot the hostage.
Yeah,
that's his plan. He's gonna, and he follows through on it. He also does this with the elevator problem. He goes up to the roof, and they find this crane that's gonna hold the elevator up. Then the bus sequences, his method keeps getting tested over and over by Howard Payne, and that's why this pop quiz frames the high concept as not just a revenge test, but it's actually it's this framework for how Jack will overcome Howard in the end. It's not just revenge for Howard Payne. He wants to prove that Jack isn't smarter than him, as he even says in that sort of hand-to-hand battle on top of the train. He says, I'm smarter than you. I'm smarter. And then of course he gets his head knocked off, and then
yeah.
Jack gets his one-liner for the film.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's a great hook. Johnny, would you agree with that with the bomb?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so I was literally just thinking about what a great hook it was before you even said that quote, Jackson. It's like that, what a great concept. And that really nails it. It's part of what gives Speed its own identity. What I want to talk about is the direction. The direction is more than just trying to avoid continuity errors, trying to avoid film flubs. There's an art to the pacing of a movie and the art to making sure that there's an energy to it. With Jan de Bont, I know he was the cinematographer for Flatliners, which you talked about. He was the cinematographer for Die Hard, for Basic Instinct, and this was the movie that he wanted to cement himself as an action director. The thing that with Die Hard, just to compare it, the reason that I would still consider Die Hard the epitome. And even though Jackson, like the arguments that you're making, that's hard to argue with. Like you can make that argument, and I believe you. It's like, yeah, I could definitely buy that. For me, like personally, Die Hard has a visual language to it. The way that de Bont and McTiernan would shoot the movie, so that even if it's McClane, like in a room by himself, if it's outside with a Powell, like they will do a thing where they'll have the backgrounds kind of blurry, and so it would still have a claustrophobic feel to Die Hard even when it's outside. Or they would have like the way that they would diminish McClane in like doorways and diminish him in the frame to make him, or with lines and shadows, to kind of make him feel weak, right? There's a visual language to Die Hard that's unlike almost any action movie I've seen. And I think the comparison I make here is like, there was a show, if you guys are familiar with Bobby Flay, there was a show that he did called Beat Bobby Flay, where he would get like you would try to go up against an expert and like cooking steaks or grilling or making hamburgers. And there was this one that he did where he had to go up against a woman that made wedding cakes professionally. And he looked at it and said, there is no way that I'm going to be able to design a cake that's going to be better than hers, because she's studied for decades and this is her profession. I'm just coming into this. There's no way I'm going to be better than that. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make this the tastiest, most delicious cake I can. And that's how I'm going to be able to beat her. And that's what people are. And so it's the same thing with Jan de Bont. I don't think that there's a visual language like he created and crafted with Die Hard. But the way that he paces the movie, there's an energy to the way that the camera moves. And it's not always showy. Like when the camera, like especially the part where you're looking at the elevator scene, and the camera's like moving when they're up on the roof, or when they realize that the elevator's going to crash and they rush downstairs. Just the way that the camera's moving, there's a kind of a visceral quality that gets you involved in an energy to it. And that's what makes Speed, but during the quiet moments, it's quiet. It's not flashy. It's not always, it's only flashy when it's required to be flashy, when it's required to get you to feel something. So that's the visual language of Speed. There are multiple like gaffes. Like there are parts where you can see the camera reflected in glass. There are parts you can see the shadow. There's a part where before they jump the bridge, like there's a shot of all the cops on the little trailer, and you can tell that the speed of the film is ramped up because they're moving like really jittery.
Yeah.
Even the part where they jump the bridge, and I know that it's the perspective or whatever, but when they digitally removed the bridge, they added like birds, like digital birds to fly in between to kind of sell the moment. But if you look, there's also like the shadow of the bridge. There's no break in the shadow. So even though it's in the moment when you look at that, it's like, well, you can look at the angle or whatever, but they might have forgotten to take that shadow out digitally. I'm not sure if that's a mistake or not. But the point I'm making here is, even though you see these mistakes, that's not what great direction is. What makes Speed so much of an action movie is number one, it's that direction. It's moving. It's constantly moving. It's the next thing. It's a screenplay. I know that we're going to have to mention his name. Like Joss Whedon came in and what's the story of Jackson? He wrote all the dialogue for the movie.
He did an extensive polish on it. So there's been dialogue back and forth over the years as to how much of it Graham Yost wrote and how much of it Joss Whedon wrote. Yost, he kind of admits that at this point, a lot of the memorable stuff, the pop quiz stuff, some of the one-liners here and there, that was Whedon.
Yeah.
However, the bones of it were all there. The thing that I will give Graham Yost here is that it's essentially 3 movies in one, 3 action, big set pieces all in one that you kind of get from this script that is so, it's such a rigid 3-act script that, it just works like clockwork. And you go from, the elevator sequence at the beginning, which one of the big things that I love about that is that the elevator sequence was not in the original script.
Yeah.
That was something that Graham Yost added because he felt the film needed to kick off with something big and something that would really set the tone. But the funny thing is that, when exactly that sequence was added has kind of been muddled over the years, because they've said, well, it was added before it went to Paramount or after it went to Fox or here or there. But regardless, I think it was crucial, because one of the things that it established was Jack's character. We get to see him as this problem solver who thinks of solutions when he's put under pressure. He's arrogant, which we learn in the opening sequence, and it ultimately comes back to bite him when he loses Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's really amazing is this opening 30 minutes acts as almost like an overture for the remaining 90 minutes of the film, because you get these moments that rhyme with what happens in the future, where he's set up with a scenario of these people he needs to save, then he comes up with this solution. Maybe it helps or it doesn't, and he has to go with a plan B, and then ultimately it ends up working out for Jack. But then the bomber comes back to threaten someone else that's important to him, whether it's Harry in the opening sequence or if it's Annie in the end when they're in the subway scene. So it's a really cool sequence that just kind of added to it and wasn't a part of it in the beginning, and really answered this question of, why is there a bomb on the bus in the first place? Well, Jack ruined Howard Payne's plans.
The first thing that this movie does that I absolutely adore is there is no tragic backstory to Jack, right? There's no explanation. Like, he doesn't like drop his best friend's girl in the middle of a chasm. It's not like that, even though in Cliffhanger that's a great sequence. What I love about action movies, and most recently like Mission Impossible Fallout did this, Mad Max Fury Road did this, it's not what the characters say, it's not what their background is. How the characters are defined in action movies is how they handle the action. It's the action defining the characters as opposed to characters being forced into action, right? And that's what defines them. So if you're looking at that opening, I think Roger Ebert called it a curtain raiser with the elevator. That's all character stuff. That's getting you ready. Like you said, it's an overture for the rest of the movie with the human qualities of the characters, with those little foibles and quirks. It also lets you know exactly the kind of man Jack is, the kind of man Harry is, so that the whole rest of the movie, it scores off of that. So whether it's Whedon giving a dialogue polish, or the Gigantor stuff, or all the, I've already been to the airport, that kind of thing, whether it's Yost in the bones of it, whether it's de Bont coming up with the elevator scene, whether it's de Bont driving past on a freeway and thinking, oh, what if there is a gap in the road? And so they add that scene into it, to kind of enhance everything. It's everybody working together. That's the sign of a great movie. It's not just one thing working. It's everything working. It's like a watch, like a cheap cold watch, except it still has to have all the working parts working in tandem to be able to work that. Johnny, is that something that you would agree with as far as action movies go, and how would Speed? Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was going to mention this too, that I think they did a great job in this movie establishing character and relationships. I think when you first meet Jack and Harry, and they're back and forth, they have an instant chemistry as well. So they develop that, and then even the little background characters on the bus, they all have a character, and they all have this developed. You can tell that they put a lot of effort into their characters, and they brought a lot to the table as well. So everything, like you mentioned, kind of came together. Not just the crew, but the actors, but everything came together. And I think, like you say, it's a good sign of a good movie.
There are, and Jackson, if you want to input here, but there's no cardboard characters in this. Like, if you look at the elevator scene, that woman that decides she gets scared and she doesn't win it causes more problems, right? It causes more complications. That's human characteristics. And on the bus, there's not a character on that bus who's a cardboard cutout. Everybody has their own personality, whether it's Ortiz, whether it's the Alan Ruck character, I forget his name, Cameron. That's
not Cameron.
Yeah.
I did make the joke we were watching it. Don't let my Cameron go. When he's
right. So whether Stevens, I think is his name. Whether it's I think we mentioned Ortiz. Whether it's the Glenn Plummer character, the driving the car. Everybody is so human that's I don't know how to explain it. Like, that's what takes this movie to the next level. It's not just one thing. It's everybody's has a stake. Everybody has something to contribute to the movie, even though they can't really do anything. And it's to the point where I think the most human, and we're tying it back to Keanu Reeves, the most human part in this, and actually the two most human parts, is when Helen gets sucked under the bus, right? The movie takes time to pause. And the Mark Mancini music obviously cuts in and sells the emotion, but it takes time to pause and lets the people react to her death and how it's impacted them. When in most movies, it wouldn't do that, but it humanizes them. So that's one of the human, and we can talk about that. But I think the most human part is when Jack, who's the stoic guy, who's the leader, who comes on this bus and everybody's kind of unsure of him at first. Even Annie kind of thinks he's a jerk, but he takes charge to the point where he gets off the bus. They don't want him to leave, right? Because you're our guy. You're the stalwart. We don't want you to get off of this because you're the one that's gave us like structure, right? But when Jack gets back on, and when we find out that Harry's been killed, which again, Jeff Daniels selling that part, the most hoary, cliched part of this movie is Harry dying, because you can see that coming a mile away if you're familiar with action scenes, right? Like the partner, right? Because it's sold, the characters are sold, it works. But when Jack reacts to that and he finally breaks down, and he's freaking out, and and when I watched it yesterday, I got tears in my eyes because it was so well done. Like, he's losing it, but Annie's like, I can't have you doing this. You need to be our leader. You can't be breaking down, because if you break down, we're going to break down. And he controls himself, and he gets a hold of himself. He looks at everybody on the bus and kind of takes a breath, to the point where he's able to look at Annie's jacket and see the Wildcat. And that kind of pushes the movie to its next stage, right? But those human qualities man, like if we're Die Hard is one of the most human action movies, and that's, you know, the Bruce Willis thing, how he wasn't like the Arnold Schwarzenegger with the quips. He was like us, and he wasn't like you talked about Jackson. He wasn't like the big buff hero. He was the guy that looked like he was barely holding on and barely managing. It's that same humanness and speed that I think works. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention that moment as well, so I'm glad you brought it up, Darren. I had read that Jan de Bont actually had to adjust the shooting schedule because of River Phoenix's death. And River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves were historically really good friends from even before they worked on My Private Idaho. And so that really, really hit hard for him. And I think both Jan de Bont and I think Dennis Hopper had mentioned that there was sort of this grief that was bubbling under for Keanu, at least early in the production. And I was watching that scene the other night and I couldn't help but wonder, like, if maybe he was pulling from that somehow, pulling from some of that emotion, losing a friend during that scene, because it just comes off so authentically. And then another human moment that really stands out to me when you brought that up was the scene when he's on the dolly and he's just about to go under the bus, and you've had this time with him and Annie kind of connecting over the course of this whole film, and he's going under and he makes eye contact with her and she looks down at him, and it's just a split second of like really like this true connection, as you feel like there's a paid off relationship there that you just don't see in a lot of action movies or movies where there's not this care and time paid to something like that. So that really felt like another human moment for me as well. And then one that gets echoed again when they're on the subway train and he realizes that he can't stop the train, and he turns around and he's like, I don't have the key to those handcuffs. I can't, and that's just, it echoes that.
Yeah. And again, that's that they take time for those moments. That's, I think, what makes Speed so special. It's recognizable and it's empathetic. Johnny, like we talked about Keanu's like acting, that part where he breaks down. What do you think of that? And like Jackson bringing up River Phoenix's death, like, what do you think? Like, does that tie in? Does that help his performance, or is that his best moment in the movie?
Well, I mean, you can argue that, but I will say that as an actor, though, you have to pull from your own experience. So if he pulled from River Phoenix's death to reach that point, then that's great, because you're supposed to do that. That's what you're required to do. If you don't do that, then you're just faking it, and people can tell you're faking it. So you want to make it as real as possible, and so if that's what he did, great.
Right. So we want to talk about Jan de Bont a little bit more and go into that direction, but I think like a couple more things that I want to talk about, especially with the structure of the movie. Like Jackson, you talked about how it's a very tight 3-act, and I agree. Like you have the curtain raiser, you have the meat of the story, which it's fascinating that this is a movie about a bomb in a bus, but he's only on the bus for what, like 50 minutes? Out of an hour and 50 minutes, right? And so I don't know, like the thing when you're a clone of something, I think you're trying to prove yourself in a way, right? Like it's, if you go in like, oh, this is going to be a Die Hard clone, it's like, okay, what do they got for us now? Like obviously we saw Cliffhanger and all this stuff, and Under Siege I think was 92, so that came before this. So how are you going to prove yourself? How are Speed and Keanu and everything, how are you going to prove that you're a better Die Hard clone than these others are? I think that the movie as it goes, it builds in confidence to the point where I buy it. I don't like, there's a weirdness I think to the comic book like font. Like they have like the title sequence where I think even me and Johnny, when we saw, we're like, well, that's strange. Like it's a superhero-esque, like kind of like Superman kind of level font. Was like, well, what mood are they going for here? And then when you see Hopper, he stabs like the security guard in the ear, right? I think I wrote the note down and I was like, oh, this is like a slasher movie, to start with. It's like, this is weird. Like, where's this identity? And to the point where I like when it's Jack and Harry, like I think you mentioned on Twitter, like the scene where they jump the car, that introduces Jack and Harry, right? That's great, because it tells you what you need to know about Jack.
The most exaggerated way you can introduce an action hero, and they're like, this is our guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the point where I like the beginning, because it seems like Jack he's spouting these one-liners. So he's like, the basement, or will the mystery guest please sign in, or cool, all these things. But what I liked about Jeff Daniels' character is Jeff Daniels is there. Like every time he makes a comment, Harry's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Or you're deeply nuts, like he calls him on his cocksureness. Like he keeps calling him on. I like that. And the thing with the again, there's no tragic backstory. There's just little kind of crumbs that give you a hint. Like when Harry's saying pop quiz, I get the feeling that they do that a lot. You know what I mean? It's not just something that he came up with on the fly. That's their dynamic. So it's like Harry is the mentor and like Jack is the trainee, so to speak, right? So I thought that was very good. And then, you know, I wrote down here that every act it takes place like its own mini movie. Like you have the setup with the people on the elevator, you have the complications when, you know, it falls or whatever, and you have Jack and Harry and the cops have to come in. It has the rising action where they try to confront, after they save all the hostages, they try to confront Howard on the elevator, and it climaxes, and then it calms down, and then it builds up again to the point where Jack, the bus explodes, right? And then he runs, and again, human moment, he runs up trying to save the bus driver. And he's shielding himself from the heat, but he's like, he does this thing where he goes, like he's trying to get to see if his friend is okay. And because he knows his friend is dead, there's a human recognition there. And that's what kind of sets him off. And, you know, that's what I'm talking like, and it builds, and the overture with introducing the human characters in the elevator that carries over to the human characters in the bus. I think this whole sequence on the bus, the way they move from complication to complication it's ingenious the way that that's written. And then there's a relaxation point where Jack realizes, again, using his brain, get off this ramp. Let's go and let's circle the airport, right? So that gives him a little breather. They're able to solve things out. But then obviously there's a complication with Jack underneath and the gas. And so that leads to the next thing where they have to, you know, get off the bus and they have to do the loop. And then it leads to, and then I think, was there a story that they needed a climax? And so they added the subway after this, Jackson? Did they also add that?
Yeah. Actually, the funny thing is they were originally going to have the climax of the film at Dodger Stadium, and they were going to have the bus end up there and circle the parking lot of Dodger Stadium, which, if you're familiar with the LA area, is like one of the only places where you could have a bus just driving in circles, you know, for long stretches of time. But the production couldn't get Dodger Stadium. They couldn't get approval. They tried all sorts of other things. They were trying to get the Great Western Forum. They tried to get a local racetrack, everything you could imagine. Finally, Location Scout says, how about LAX, you know? And so they were able to secure LAX, which, you know, even though it would be very iconic for the bus to have like crashed through the Hollywood sign or whatever they were planning originally, I just felt like the pyrotechnics of the airplane explosion, the bus going into it and all that was just so much bigger, and felt like it felt like just like bigger and better. And then of course you had this added detail that I don't know if they'd even thought about, which was coloring Jack's character as thinking quick on his feet and saying, oh, we can go to the airport and it's restricted airspace. Helicopters can't find us. So that was, you know, that was an improvement upon that. But then once they moved it to LAX, one of the things that the studio said was there's too much bus, you know, bus happening. So we need to have something else happen. So that's where Yost said that they decided to do the subway thing, which was pretty cool because it was like this additional set piece that was like, you know, it's not over yet, and allowed him and Hopper to be face to face again.
It just seems like, even though I think it's earned with the subway, it seems like out of anything, like that's the scene that feels tacked on. Because I think as solid as the second act is, I think a lot of the logic starts to lapse after the bus is. So I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Like, first of all, I know that the cameras are unable to operate, right? But the helicopters and the news reporters are so prominent that when there's a giant explosion, you know, of the bus, how come nobody reports on it? You know what I mean? Like, there's the part where Jack goes, he doesn't know it blew up. And I'm like, well, wouldn't he know? Like, why aren't the news reporters like reporting on this explosion?
Watching the news.
Yeah. So there's the one thing. And then the second thing is when they plant the money, right? And I don't know if this is a flub or not. Jackson, what's your opinion on this? Like, obviously there's a part where Howard opens up the bag and it explodes on him, right? Yeah. But when Jack finds Annie at the bottom, Howard has Annie put all the money in a separate sack. Was the bomb not set to go up until later? Or why doesn't the paint bomb go off when Annie is trying to move the money?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was like a sack, like a plastic sack inside of the other bag. That's what I've always, you know, you kind of justified that with.
Maybe she armed it. Maybe she was the one who armed the.
Yeah,
maybe. Except I don't know how she would know that. So you could like bend over backwards trying to. I just think that the thing with he doesn't know it blew up was a little. I was like, hold on, like that was the first that was the first part in the movie where it was like, I buy the bus jumping, right? I buy that Jack is able to be under the bus, even though the bus is going in circles. Like it's not going straight. Like how is he able to stay under the bus? You know what I mean? That whole time. I still buy that because it's part of the aesthetic. But the part with Howard not knowing that that was the first part. I was like, hold on. And then there's a part where she moves the money. It's like, wait, hold on. Like I noticed, why didn't the thing go off on her? And then like I mentioned that Jack is like doing all these one-liners and Harry calls him on. I think it's funny that as soon as I like the yeah, but I'm taller line after Howard says I'm smarter than you. But then it becomes a James Bond movie. Like he comes down and like Andy goes, what happened to Payne? He goes, he lost his head. I was like, whoa, that's a James Bond line if I ever heard one. But I think it's that moment you talked about, Jackson, where he says, I don't have the key. Or it's the moment I thought was hilarious, which we've got to mention Joe Morton. I love that he's the stalwart. I love that he's not just the boss yelling stuff. He's like, thanks for not getting dead. Thanks for doing he just treats Jack as not an employee, but as a coworker. I like that.
Yeah. He's like such an empathetic character too.
Yeah.
Like Joe Morton, and just like, he just handles it in such a different way than the typical sort of, I'm thinking of Joey Pants in Bad Boys, that typical like chief of police that's just yelling at all the cops and just degrading them.
Frank McRae in Last Action Hero.
Exactly. And so Joe Morton is a great like counter to that, this is just something different.
Yeah,
he learned his lesson after being fired from Skynet, so he's
yes,
right. Stupid SWAT. I'm glad he was promoted to a SWAT member. You know what I mean? But when Joe Morton comes back in, like I was like, hold on. Well, that was a James Bond line. But when Joe Morton comes on over the radio, it was like, Jack, the track isn't finished. This time I laughed because like that might be the most plausible line in the whole movie. Like, of course the track isn't finished, right? Like, so I laughed at that. I thought that was great. And instead of like slowing it down, because obviously he shot Richard Schiff, right? Like, and so he can't fight. The subway's kind of ruined, and he's like, I'm gonna speed it up. It's like, oh, there's the title. So anyway, so it's even though I think the movie had proven its mettle by that point. So even at the end when it kind of loses me a little bit, I think that's the weakest part of the whole movie. It's still of a piece. It just kind of becomes an 80s like Commando, especially when you have Billy Idol doing like the theme song for the movie.
Right.
It becomes an 80s movie all of a sudden, which I don't think quite matches the rest of the movie, but I still think is fun. It kind of works.
Well, I definitely see the 3-act structure. I was seeing it as I was watching it just a little while ago, and I think overall it works though. Like even though there may be these little things here and there that you might it might pull you out. You might go, wait a minute, why the helicopter's there? Or maybe, wait a minute, why isn't this there? Why was the explosion on the news? That kind of thing happens, but you can forgive it because you're still on this journey. You're still going for this ride. And you're still like, at least I was still, on board with this. So you can forgive those things. And so I think overall it works.
Yeah. Because this is like becoming like, even though we're doing 90s movies, I'm quoting like Top Gun Maverick, like constantly, like every episode, but a line from that movie is, it's not the plane, it's the pilot, right? It doesn't like matter. Like, even though there's hoary stuff going on, it's like, how does the movie work? Is the filmmaking good? Is the pacing? And I think Speed, because of the character work and everything, it works beautifully. And so you buy all these things, even though it's impossible for a bus to jump a gap like that, it's still, it works within the aesthetic of the movie. Jackson, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the momentum, this propulsive filmmaking that's taking place in this movie is what, is driving it forward. Even if you're hit with some things that are kind of unbelievable, you're just like, you're caught up in the moment. You're on this ride with it, which is what, I think is a little different for me than some of the other, if we're talking about diehard films. They don't all have this sort of propulsive on a ride thing where it's like one set piece after another, and they're on the freeway. Now they have to get off the freeway. Then they're, going into oncoming traffic, and there's like this sharp turn. It's like one thing after another. And it's actually, it's just, that's something that stands out to me about this film. Another thing that I wanted to mention that didn't come up earlier was how much of a definitively LA film this is, LA action film. I know we no longer live in the age of movies where you can like point at the screen and say like, I know where that is, because everything's, shot in the volume or in a soundstage, and it makes it to the screen vaguely resembling the world that we live in. But Speed is this movie that's so tangible. It's an actual location. It's a real life place where, you know, you recognize these things, especially if you are from Southern California. And I sent Darren this picture earlier of, it's a map of LA where you can actually see the route that was taken over the course of the movie, you know, from starting in Venice or Santa Monica, where Annie gets picked up on the bus, you know, moving across Culver City on the 10 freeway, down through the surface streets, all the way to the 105. And this was just one of those things where it's like, man, from the opening scene in the gas company tower in downtown LA, all the way to the, you know, to the 105 freeway, these are all places and things that are real and just makes it feel so authentically, you know, LA. One of the things that I've always felt about this movie is, one, it couldn't have been made in any other city than LA because of sort of all the dynamics of it. And then secondly, it couldn't have been made in any other time than 1993. One of the things, you know, as I was doing research over the past year or so, was 93 was the city's last year of large scale freeway construction. So you needed a place to shoot all these freeway scenes. And the 105 freeway was not completed until the fall of 93. So Jan de Bont had this 18-mile long full scale set to shoot all of these freeway scenes on for, I think they had like 6 or 8 weeks that they were on that on. And then like a week or two after they were done shooting, the freeway opens and they'd never have that opportunity ever again. And I just can't imagine that being done today. This would all be CGI. And it's so interesting to see it unfold, especially because you have like the first act of the movie is all about the vertical nature of downtown LA. And then the rest of the movie is all this horizontal expanse. It's just interesting how that all plays out.
I think maybe Jan de Bont kind of used all his ingenuity up with this movie, and like everything has kind of been like diminishing returns, right?
Well, yeah, I will say I am a big fan of Twister. I'm not shy about that. And I think that he did some interesting things there that he didn't do in Speed, and he kind of expanded on that, and he was working with a bigger cast of really good supporting actors and character actors in that, and gave them a lot of space to perform, and was also working with a lot more CGI in that film, you know, to great effect. So, you know, I will give him that. And I'd say Speed and Twister are, you know, to my money, I would say one of my favorite, or at least on the short list of favorite back-to-back films in a director's filmography for me. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, he went on and tried recapturing the magic again. The thing that's frustrating is that Jan de Bont didn't even want to do Speed 2, but he was contractually obligated to do it by the studio. And so he was like, I want to do this other movie. And they said, no, you got to do Speed 2 next. And that was how he came back to Fox with that.
What I thought was funny is we were talking about flubs. There's a part where Howard or Dennis Hopper is talking to Jack on the phone, and we know that he's lost his thumb on his left hand, right? And I like the touch that he's holding up the phone to his ear, because I guess the hint was like maybe he's deaf in his other ear and he has to hold it like this. But when he's talking to Jack, he snaps his fingers. You can hear him snap, but he doesn't have a thumb on that free hand. It was like, why did you add Jan de Bont? Why did you add that sound effect if you know he doesn't have a thumb?
And it is fun to notice those things. But with Jan de Bont, this was his directorial debut. This was his first time in the director chair. And so he's had a long career as a cinematographer. I mean, he worked on movies like Jewel of the Nile, Ruthless People. I know we mentioned Die Hard and Flatliners there. You know, I talked about that one already. But The Hunt for October, you know, Basic Instinct, Lethal Weapon 3.
Classics.
Probably my most favorite is, you know, Leonard Part 6. We can't forget that one. But no, I kid. But anyway, Jan de Bont, I think what I'm trying to say is all this that he went through, his whole career kind of led him to Speed. And I can't imagine him having the experience of being a cinematographer and going through everything he went through, all his other movies, a well-established career, and then tackling Speed. Without that, he wouldn't have been able to. And so I think it was the right time, the right moment for him to do that movie. And like you, Jackson, I enjoy Twister as well. But I will say that I think Speed is probably the best movie he's ever made, even though it has mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're maybe all in agreement that Speed was kind of his pinnacle. Like he's right out of the gate. He masters everything to the point where even though he's not the best at keeping the flubs out, like the direction still works so well that stuff doesn't matter at the end of the day. It doesn't drag the movie down. Jackson, what do you think? I don't want to go about it too much, but what do you think the difference is between Speed and Speed 2? Why doesn't Speed 2 work other than the fact that you can't speed on a cruise ship? Like,
Well,
what other than that?
I think the studio was underestimating the power of the chemistry that the two leads had. That you
Yeah.
had Keanu and Sandra Bullock. Again, I think Keanu had great instincts because he's been on record that the script he was not on board with that script at all. He was like, on a boat, like what's going on there? A cruise ship. And it didn't work. I tried to rewatch it a couple months ago when I was going to talk to Jordan and Nick about it on Film Shake. And there's just so many problems with it. And it wasn't a sequel that was really warranted, even though this movie was so good.
Yeah. I don't think Speed 2 is one of the worst movies ever made. I wouldn't even say it's the worst sequel ever made. I just think it misses the point of what made the first movie so special. And that's the problem with it. If you're talking about, Johnny Jan de Bont and how he kind of like hit his stride with Speed and then kind of nothing after that, except for maybe Twister. But when you talk about the studio interference, I think that even applies to Speed. It's like the studio coming in and saying, well, we're the studio that released Die Hard, which just took place in an office building, but a bus is not exciting enough. Like, it's weird that they would think that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the weakness that we talked about with that third act, it kind of comes because of studio, and it still works. You know what I mean? But
the studio interfered all over the place here. I mean, there was, Harry Temple was originally supposed to be the villain.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys read or heard about this, but so Ed Harris was originally like the top choice to play Harry, and he was going to be his partner and working alongside Jack. And then it was going to be revealed in the third act that he was the villain all along. And the problem with that is that there was also going to be an accomplice, and Howard Payne was going to be the accomplice to Harry. And and then Yost said, he wanted Payne and Jack to have more contact. And once the elevator sequence satisfied that, there wasn't really a need to have Harry be involved with it anymore. And then on top of that, then the studio said, okay, well, we want you to make this less complicated, so just make it one villain. And so once the elevator sequence was made, then they were able to say, okay, well, we'll cast Dennis Hopper. And that was another thing Yost was not counting on, was someone like Dennis Hopper in that role. And he just kind of elevated it to a whole different thing than I think even the writers and the producers were expecting.
Yeah. Even though that character, the Payne character, as written, I think he's fairly one note, but I think Dennis Hopper adds that extra dimension to him. It's the same thing with Harry, and we talked about, even though he dies, and it's like, oh, why didn't I see that coming? That's like action movie cliche number 1 or number 101. So, whatever, it's the action cliche, but Jeff Daniels sells it. Like, he's a good character, he's likable. So having Harry turn out to be the bad guy would have overcomplicated it. This movie is so streamlined, and that's what I think is beautiful about it. Johnny, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with that. But there was something I wanted to mention. We were talking about not having the backstory with the lead character.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of would have liked that. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I would have liked to seen more of, a backstory with Jack's character, but you don't need it. I think it's fine without it, but I'm always just looking for character and character development. So I might have enjoyed that if they had done that.
If Jackson, if you were to say that this is the number 1 action movie in the 90s, or even your favorite action movie of all time, yeah, like, I don't have an argument with that. Like, you could argue that, and I'll be like, sure, like, why not? Like,
Darren's got a poster in his room right there in front of him.
Yeah, just right here, Speed. So why not, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that Speed is worth the memory. But like, Jackson, do you have a final word on Speed? Is there anything you want to say to kind of wrap up our conversation about the movie itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely worth remembering. Whether or not you saw it in the 90s and have grown up with it, or you're watching it for the first time now, I think it's really held up. And I think, I put it up there as one of those standards, like a movie from the 90s that has held up to today. And we have to put it up as a measuring stick, like Jurassic Park, or, something like that, where we compare these movies today to it. And so I'd say, yeah, it's definitely something that deserves to be remembered and revisited. And, for me, it's one of the most quotable action movies, even though it's not necessarily, Keanu was not wanting to go in having it be a one-liner thing. There's just these lines here and there, like we were talking about, that choices that he made that have stood the test of time and just put a smile on my face when I hear them.
I will often quote Alan Ruck's line when people swear at work. I'll be like, "Oh darn."
Yes, yes.
Again, characters. It's all about selling the characters, right? And Jackson, what you're talking about, I think you're right. It's not nostalgia if you can still look at a movie and it can still teach you things about how a movie should be structured and directed, to the point where Michael Bay is trying to do a better Speed than Jan de Bont did, right? It's that kind of thing. So yeah, Speed is such a great. I'm so glad that you're able to bring this and we're able to chat about this and bring new things and have new discussion points to talk about. And I appreciate you, Jackson. How can people find you on Twitter? How can people, if you're a podcast listening to this, how can people get a hold of you to be a guest in their podcast?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so at Jackson Boren on Twitter. That's the main place where I am. I'm spouting nonsense and sharing my love for movies on there if you're interested, and love being on podcasts like this and sharing the love for movies that we've grown up with and movies that we're enjoying today. So
yeah. Well, yeah, the thing with listening to podcasts, right, is sometimes you have a guest that comes on and they don't quite match the level of the hosts. Like the hosts are the masters of it. They know how to handle it. But all the podcasts have listened to you, whether it's the Video Confidential, whether it's Uncut Gems, whether it's Film Feast, Film Shake, you come onto this and you're schooling the hosts. That's what I love about listening to you on these podcasts. You come on here and I think all the trivia that you've got about the movie, you've schooled us. It's like you're risen to a level where I do think I still think you should have your own podcast. I think you'd be great at it. So
I was going to say, I hope I've met your expectations. I hope
yeah.
And then some, yeah.
Yeah. To the point where we're going to want to have you back. I mean, obviously there are more movies that we want to, I'd love to get your input on a lot more things. And again, such a great follow. It's at Jackson Boren. Is that your Twitter handle? Is that right?
Yes. At Jackson Boren, JACKSONBOREN. And yeah, look forward to connecting with others. I know, I've met a ton of people through you on Twitter who are great follows and great film enthusiasts, guests that you've had on. So it's just been a real positive network.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jackson, keep those tweets coming, keep those podcast appearances coming. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jackson.
Okay. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Okay, all right, bye-bye.
All right, Harry, we're in. Passenger relay. Sir, take this. I want you to tell him what I see. Okay! We got a wad! Pretty big! There's a pretty big wad. Brass fittings? Brass fittings. I think I can reach the circuit wire. He can reach the circuit wire.
No, don't. That's a decoy, classic.
That's your classic decoy.
What else?
What else? Hold on. Hold on. Me. Oh, darn.
And welcome back. Again, we want to thank Jackson Boren for dropping by to talk about Speed. Great conversation. I always like talking about Keanu Reeves and, the idea is that he's not a very good actor, but like we talked about in our Bill and Ted episode, he tries to branch out and do different things.
Yeah, I respect that. And I want to say, I'm glad Jackson picked Speed because he didn't think I was going to pick it. So,
yeah.
Right.
I mean, driving up and seeing that in the Salt Lake Theater or Sandy Theater or whatever, I mean, that was a big deal for us. And I remember walking out just on a high. And so it's definitely, we're talking about these movies in the 90s. It's not just that we love these movies, it's that we remember so fresh the experience of what it was like to watch them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Speed was a fun one. I just remembered walking out thinking, well, I didn't think it was going to be that good, and we were just knocked out by it. So
yeah,
just being able to chat about all that is great. So we didn't really mention what outro topic. I kind of feel bad sometimes when we have a guest on saying, oh, we'll see you later, and we're going to have another additionally fun conversation while you're off doing something. I feel uncomfortable doing that most of the time. But so thinking about the outro though, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to do like maybe our top 3 action sequences of the 90s instead of action movies? So I just thought that'd be fun to kind of do a rundown. And we look at action different ways, right? I mean, I think we talked about in Speed with the characters are defined by the action instead of like something that's happened back when they were kids or something like that, because it's the now that matters, right? So if we want to just run down again, I think we'll do like maybe a 3, 2, 1, kind of jump back and forth. Does that sound good? Okay. So I'll go ahead and I'll go first, but and we'll mention it kind of briefly because I think we might be having a conversation about this later. Like Speed being something you want to talk about. I think this movie is something we want to talk about, but I'm going to pick Face Off as one of my favorite action sequences. And I don't know, again, John Woo, so very big in the 90s. He's got a lot of great action sequences.
Well, yeah, which one? That's the thing. Which one are you picking?
Yeah, which one? So when I'm thinking, I don't just think like the propulsiveness or the visceralness of it. There's something else. There's a scene in Face Off where it's, Castor Troy or Sean Archer as Castor Troy. So the Nicolas Cage as John Travolta. It's complicated. If you've seen Face Off, you know what we're talking about. We don't really go dive that deep into it, but he goes and he visits his old crew and Sasha and everything, and the Gina Gershon character. And as he's doing that, he's attacked by Archer and the cops, so the good guys, right? And as this is happening, Sasha obviously has a son. It's Michael, right? Or is it Adam? I can't remember. It's Michael and it's Adam, right?
Adam? I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, so it's basically in biblical terms, it's the same name. Like Adam is also known as Michael. So it's a lot of good deep stuff in Face Off. But while this gunfire is going off, Sasha decides to put earphones on her son and to distract him from all the violence and the gunfire to keep him from freaking out, right? And she plays, which is a nice little touch. It's Olivia Newton-John, the John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John, Grease kind of connection. But she puts on Over the Rainbow from Wizard of Oz. And what's great about it, you ever watch an action scene and all of a sudden it's like you can tell it's being directed, like it's not just chaos, like you can tell there's a point to it. And it's just, you see all the slow motion tableaus like Woo usually has, but it's Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's playing very, or like ironically with what the action is. It's like the song singing about a better life somewhere else. And you're seeing like the robbers, which is always in a John Woo movie. You see the bad guys are just as empathetic as the good guys. It's kind of his dynamic there. But you see all the bad guys dying and the gunfire going off. And it's just very like sad and kind of like I said, it's ironic, but it's so powerful as an action scene. You know what I mean? Because you can tell there's something else that's happening besides just the usual gunplay that Woo has in his movies. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it because we might be conversing about this in a future episode. But yeah, just a very, very impressive and standout action scene, which doesn't just exist as action, I think.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That sequence always sticks with me. So yeah, good pick.
Yeah. Okay, so that's my number 3. What's yours?
Okay, well, I'll start with Speed. Because I have to say, like, even though it's ridiculous that a bus can jump that gap in the road, it's so intense and it's so well directed, and the whole lead up to it and the moment of impact, all of that, it's so effective, and I think it's just a really, really well directed action sequence. So I have to pick Speed, the bus jump.
Yeah. Well, if we're thinking about it, and that's again probably the most iconic moment in the whole movie, even though it's ridiculous, right? But if you think about Speed is basically 3 like sustained action set pieces that are just strung together, and it just happens to be that the second one lasts like an hour, right, on the bus. It's really technically, and I want to say literally, it's literally a one long sustained action sequence, like, from one thing to another, right? And it kind of climaxes and kind of splits, so you can split that second act into 2 with when they jump the bus, then they go into the airport, it takes on a different ideal. But yeah, Speed is great because when I think of action, I think of not just action scenes broken up by dialogue bits. I mean, they're literally moving on a bus and this action's going on. So like you said, the bus jump is the most iconic. So yeah, definitely a good pick for a memorable action scene. So the second one I'm going to pick, and it's from Heat, the Michael Mann movie, 1995. Which is weird because Heat, if you watch it, it's not really an action movie. There's maybe like 3 action scenes in the whole sequences of the whole movie. There's the opening heist. There's the bank robbery, which is what I want to talk about. And there's the whole Neil Vincent kind of cat and mouse chase at the end. But that bank robbery, man, it's basically, Heat is basically an existential drama, right? There's a lot of talk in the movie. It's about characters talking. It's about what it means to be a criminal. It means to be a cop. They're kind of like overlapping. Again, it's that dynamic Michael Mann likes to use as well. But so that bank, all of a sudden in the middle of it breaks into a bank robbery, a full on, and spills into the street of LA. And you see cops firing at the robbers, and there's gunplay, and people are like, innocents are getting shot, all this stuff. And then I don't know. It's like, it's a you are there moment, right? Like it doesn't feel, I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't feel like an action sequence. It feels like something that's real. And so it's not just, for art, for show. It's not just cool stuff that's happening. It's like harrowing, right? You're seeing innocents get shot. You're seeing like the heroes, the villains, like everybody's getting hurt. so yeah, you've got the Robert De Niro, you got Al Pacino, you got Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, who as of we're recording here, I think Tom Sizemore just passed away. I think he had a stroke and his family turned off his life support. So in memory of him, kind of bringing this up. But I don't know. What do you think of that action scene, the bank robbery?
Well, that's the one scene I remember. Like, I know it is a long movie and it is kind of slow moving, and so there's a lot that I don't remember. And it's been a while since I've seen it, but I do remember, the diesel tipping over and the crash and the gunfight, all that stuff. So that's what sticks in my mind is that sequence. So
yeah. Well, again, it's so iconic that U.S. Marines use it as training. I think there's a part where Kilmer, his rifle runs out of ammo and he switches the mag. And he does it so fast that Marines watch that as training. So you need to do it this quick if you're in battle, it's under pressure, staying cool. And then so iconic that people tried to copy it. There was in February of 97, there was a bank robbery that broke out of the street. 11 people were hurt. 11 police officers were killed or injured, and then these two guys, what were their names? Emil Matasariano and Larry Phillips. These two bank robbers were armed to the gills, and obviously and so it was like Heat playing out in real life. So it's one of those things where people try to, like with the Matrix, how they got the R rating because that scene where Neo and Trinity go into the wherever to the security and they shoot up the place, and that they rated it R because it's kind of like the Columbine stuff. So it's like life copying art and art copying life, that kind of thing. But I just think that action scene is so, it doesn't play like an action scene. Like I said, it plays like real life. And so I think it's just very iconic. And if Marines are using it as training, it's obviously made an impact somewhere. So definitely the most memorable part of that movie. Sorry, I went on and on kind of about that one, but it's a great sequence. That's my number two.
No, I agree. Very great sequence. My number two pick. Now, I had a hard time picking which sequence, but it's from Rumble in the Bronx, Jackie Chan.
Okay.
I couldn't not pick a Jackie Chan movie because I remember you and I going to his movies in the 90s and just being like blown away every time they would do these crazy action sequences, and these objects like ladders and paint buckets or whatever they would use that was nearby, and it incorporated into their scenes, and it was just so fun to watch and is so well directed and choreographed. And so I had to pick Rumble in the Bronx, probably the whole movie actually. It's just so well done.
Well, you have the scene where he's fighting like the gang members, right? Like he finally has enough, and Jackie goes in and he's trying to, and it's that mix of comedic and like visceral stuff. So there's the funny stuff, and so, but yeah, I would think like the whole movie with that. I think that's the centerpiece of the show, other than the hovercraft where you see him like actually break his ankle,
right.
Camera. So yeah, that's definitely a good one. So if that's your number two, my number one is actually also a Jackie Chan movie.
Okay.
And I think this one, if I was really looking at, so just like you, I was looking at going, we have to have Jackie Chan in here, even though like when you think of action, I tend to think of gun battles or car chases or stuff like that. I don't usually think of martial arts fights, but that's definitely an action sequence, right? And so I was thinking, what Jackie Chan movie am I going to pick? And as soon as I hit on this, and I was like, yeah, that's got to be the one. Have you seen Drunken Master 2?
Yes. Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay. So that movie's got kind of an interesting history because it was released in 94 in China, but then it didn't come out here until 2000. And then they, US, I think Miramax or something, they cut it and they dubbed it. And so it's, still silly, but it came out as Legend of Drunken Master. But that final 20-minute, that's incredible to say that, 20-minute fight sequence. And it climaxes with Jackie fighting Ken Lo, a Taekwondo master, who I think was Jackie's bodyguard, and he stepped in because the actor that was going to play him got sick or couldn't do it. But it's a long, sustained 20-minute action sequence, and it is incredible. Like I was just watching it again, going, I think this might be the greatest fight sequence that they've ever shot because it's all over the place. There's the push and the pull. Like Jackie loses, or actually he plays Wong. What is his name? He's a folk hero, which is weird because we just talked about Braveheart, but he plays Wong Fei Hung is his name, who was a very famous martial artist and also a physician, and countless movies. Jet Li was starring and has played him before. But so he plays this folk hero, and the plot's about like British consulate trying to steal or trying to steal like Chinese artifacts and smuggle them out of the country. So it's all silly stuff. It's kind of the backbone for these action sequences, but it climaxes in this 20-minute scene where he fights all these bad guys and then Ken Lo at the end. But it's the push pull, like I said, like he loses, then he starts winning, and then he loses. So it's not just 20 minutes of Jackie just winning. He loses, and you can see that there's stakes, and there's a part where he backs over the coals, which I think he had to do like 3 times. That's amazing, like Jackie doing that on camera. And I think, Tom Cruise is the closest that we have to that, like seeing him do that kind of stuff as an American counterpart. But and at the end, when he gets drunk, because that's when he gets his powers from, like he drinks the fuel, which is crazy. And again, it's like I said, it's got the comedic stuff. It's the funny stuff with the serious stuff. And I can't tell you watching those 20 minutes or even 8 minutes and how many times I went, whoa, or how many times I burst out in laughter, or how many times I was like, oof. And it's just a testament to Jackie Chan, man. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. It's just, wow, like so.
Yeah,
what
I
a
agree.
scene.
It's really fun to watch. I totally agree with that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's my number 1. Drunken Master 2 if you're Chinese, Legend of Drunken Master if you're a lowly American. So.
Well, you've kind of touched on my number 1 pick, so I'm gonna pick The Matrix, the lobby sequence.
Okay.
Because I love this sequence when they walk in and when it's like guns, we need guns, and they get loaded up and they walk in and the slow motion hits and he opens his coat and he's got all the the guns there and just start shooting everybody up. It's so fun. It's so fun to watch. And then they go up the elevator, and then the very last thing you see is that brick fall down. And I think the brick falling off the column was actually this mistake. It just happened. And so it just like happenstance. They got that in the scene and used it at the very end of the sequence. So, but it's so fun to watch and so well done.
Yeah.
With the music, everything about that scene is just fun to watch.
Right. Well, again, I think we're probably going to come back around and talk about the Matrix. I think
we might cover the Matrix.
Yeah. So we don't really have to go into it in full detail here, but you're right. I mean, Matrix is obviously, it's inspired by anime. It's inspired by the wuxia movies. It's inspired by kung fu movies. It's all these influences kind of brought, and comic books kind of brought to the screen. And, we were wowed by it. Again, it's another movie that you walk out of and you're wowed by. And I think, other than the one-on-one battle with Keanu and Hugo Weaving, it's like, that gun battle is so well done. You know what I mean? And so when you think of action, that's definitely something that comes to mind. So, again, we've talked about Terminator 2, has a lot of great action in it. You can mention any Jackie Chan movie, Speed, Air Force One came out. So you've got a lot of these, Cliffhanger, also 93. So we could go through and we can list all sorts of action scenes, right? It's there's a whole bunch of variety. I just think that, it's what you want out of an action scene. You want visceral stuff, you want more meaning, and I think it's a little bit of everything. And I think the 6 that we picked, I think they kind of encompass all that. So again, action is really fun.
A Jackie Chan movie too. I think that's fun.
Yeah. So awesome. I'm glad we're able to, it's funny when we do these like lists, because a lot of the times we like overlap, like, okay. So we ended up talking about kind of the same stuff. Right. So, we must be childhood friends or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it must be.
So, but yeah. Okay. So that might not be, that's not going to be the last action movie that we talk about, Speed, but what are we going to talk about next time?
Well, another big movie for me, and I saw this at your house for the first time. So it's The Truman Show.
Oh, yes.
We'll revisit that one and see how that conversation goes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's, we'll talk about it. I think I just had a conversation on Twitter about it, just how prescient and how...
There's a lot to talk about with that one. So
yeah, so awesome. So, and Jim Carrey is obviously... Have we talked about Jim Carrey on the show before?
Not yet. I don't think, not yet.
I know we've mentioned him. We had to mention him.
Oh, I'm sure in other episodes, but not in this season yet.
Yeah. So let's talk about The Truman Show. That's a great choice, Johnny. Awesome. Okay. All right. So that'll do it for Speed. I'm so excited. These conversations are so fun. I'm having such a good time. I hope everybody else that's listening is having fun too. I think we're reaching a lot of people. Like, we're getting a lot of downloads and everything. So I hope that the fun that we're having is infectious. But yeah, we want to keep that going. So next time we'll talk about The Truman Show. But until then, for NostalgiaCast 90s Palooza, I'm Darren Lundberg.
And I'm Johnny Craddock.
And we'll catch you next time, hot shot.
Oh, darn.